Exaggeration, 2-minute poses. I feel that her pose is already dynamic and strong, so I wouldn't try to, really change anything or rotate her, nothing like that. I'm simply trying to demonstrate like what I'm seeing. And when I look at her, if I'm telling myself a story or trying to give context to what could possibly be happening right here, I kind of imagine that there's like a rat or a large spider on the ground and she's terrified, and so she's kind of climbing up on furniture, on things to avoid this. So, and especially because her head is tilted down as well, it makes me think there's something on the floor that has startled her. For this lesson, you're pushing extreme poses in order to effectively communicate an idea of your choice. Anatomy can be off, but the feeling captured must be spot on. This is a flirty pose. I want to quickly, as usual, identify the rib cage and the pelvis. So I'm identifying the tilt of the rib cage, the tilt of the pelvis. I'm finding the center line. When we look at her arms, if we just imagine it was all one long arm, it's kind of making like an S shape, right? So I'm keeping that in mind, but I'm going to be using here mostly straight lines. I've decided to ever so slightly change the position of her head so that the curve of energy starting from the torso all the way to the tip of her head continues like an arc. So the movement, it's like a continuous movement as the eye is looking at this pose. Don't forget there's a foreshortening of the leg furthest away. Unfortunately for this pose, with her leaning on the stool is ever so slightly moving a little bit as time goes on, and so that kind of forces the pose to change over time. But that doesn't matter, that happens in real life all the time. So I just made the decision to keep it more upright. I'm choosing to rotate her body. This is a pretty static pose, and so I want to challenge myself by imagining if I was just on the other side where I could see maybe the positioning of her legs. Of course, I'm imagining this, but that would be a bit of a challenge for me, so that's what I'm choosing to do. You want to push what you see while staying true to your subject. She looks like a mermaid here. I imagine her like a mermaid on the rocks by the sea, relaxing. I want to draw this in a way where her body can feel loose and calm. Here I'm making a decision to rotate it a little bit counterclockwise. This is optional, and I'm doing it because I think I might get something a little bit more dynamic. But honestly, you could just draw it as is, because I see here we do still have some good negative space going on, and you do see both feet. And yeah, both feet, both hands, and so you could keep it like that. I'm just explaining why I've changed it a little bit here. This pose feels like she might be praying or pleading to somebody. I've decided to make some adjustments here for a little bit for the reasons of storytelling, actually, and readability. For instance, I decided that I really wanted to show her hands more because they're pretty hidden here. I felt that showing the hands are in like this prayer position felt really important to the storytelling of this pose. I've also elongated her neck, and I'm showing more the profile of her face. This is again like if I were to block this out like all in black, I feel that that would just make it a little bit stronger of a pose. So just made those little tweaks. And as we've spoken of before, we're really thinking about, we're never forgetting about the squash and the stretch, where there's an arch in the back. We also, if we look at her feet, they are not on the same, let's say, line. We're seeing them a little bit in perspective. One foot is a little bit more behind the other. And so when we're drawing, we just want to make sure that we don't perfectly align them in a straight line. So that will give us the sense of depth. Notice the negative space between her legs forms a triangle shape. So sometimes when looking at different poses, noticing where there's negative space, this can help us draw a little bit more accurately. This pose looks like she's perhaps outside in a forest, peering through foliage, searching for something or someone. I've decided to rotate this pose a little bit so we could see both legs. And I've exaggerated a bit how much she's leaning forward, which is also why I've bent the leg, because if you're leaning forward so much but you're keeping the leg in front of you straight like that, it's kind of it's kind of uncomfortable or maybe a little bit less natural, so I decide to bend that leg. Remember that we're not thinking about perfect anatomy, but we really want to nail the idea of the pose. And the idea of the pose for you might be different from me, but I want to emphasize how she's leaning forward and it really feels like she's looking for something and her arms are out. Last pose for exaggeration. Here it feels like we have a really confident, strong stance. She has a puffed up chest and it feels like she's really self-assured. And so that's what I am going with. I don't feel like necessarily exaggerating much here, because then I feel like I would really completely change the pose anyway.